இது ஒரு நல்ல கதையா இருக்க. அது எப்படி எனக்கு தெரியாம போச்சு? நம்மெல்லாம் ஒரு குடும்பம். நம்ம எல்லாரும் ஒத்துமையா இருக்கணும்.
Hi, this is the Professional Amateur Hour coming to you with another review. And this week, Leo sent me a screener called Little JAFFNA. And this 2025 film was directed by Lawrence Valin, and actually it was written and stars Lawrence Valin as well, along with Vala Ramamurthy and Purviraj Ravindran. I'm sorry if I mispronounced those names. So what is the story of Little JAFFNA? Well, this is a French film, so it happens in Paris, and the story revolves around this undercover cop. And this undercover cop, his ethnic background is that he's Tamil, which is kind of like southern Sri Lanka, I think. And this is, a few years ago when they were having their civil war, and he is tasked to go undercover into this gang that is sending money to the rebellion side of the Civil War. So he infiltrates them and, becomes part of their gang, wins their trust, gets to know them, gets to like them, etc. And ultimately, though, he is still an undercover cop, so he really wants to find out how they're sending money to the Tamil Tigers back in Sri Lanka. So that's kind of his main mission. But what will happen? Well, for that, you gotta watch the movie and find out. All right, so let's talk about Little JAFFNA. Well, with this one, I gotta say, I really enjoyed the start of it, certainly. With this one, it takes place in Paris. So they're running through Paris streets and doing all of this kind of stuff in the streets of Paris. And it's also like kind of a Bollywood-esque movie. I know Sri Lanka is not in India, of course, so let's just say Bollywood-adjacent type of movie. And so they're having like these Bollywood-esque or adjacent fights in the streets and parties in the streets and not musical numbers, but certainly, dancing to music and stuff like that, at the parties. And it's just like a Paris that I've never seen before. And I, used to live there. And so it's just a fun time seeing all of these uncharacteristic things happen in Paris. And I just thought that was such a wonderful kind of freshness to it all that I really did enjoy that aspect to it. And they're, doing gang fights and I don't know, it's all just great fun when they're just running around Paris doing stuff. In addition, I thought all the characters had like wonderful looks about them. All the gang members of, the main character's gang just look so different, and they have, wild haircuts and I don't know, all of these very unique kind of outfits. The bad gang, they just wear like black t-shirts, so they're not, particularly, visible in the story. And then the main character, he has that skin disease where, part of your skin becomes white, which I think might be called vitiligo. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that one right, but either way, that's kind of the makeup that he has. And it certainly adds for a unique kind of looking character. They also use it kind of against him. They keep calling him Whitey because, he has these white marks on his face. I don't think the main actor, what's his name, Lawrence, I don't think he actually has that skin condition. So, it's just makeup. And the makeup doesn't change, which is good. So it stays as the shape that it's supposed to. And, you kind of believe that he has this one. And it adds certainly an element to the character as well. And certainly, like I said, they all just look interesting and just, fun people to kind of watch. And especially when they're, doing fights and running around the streets, like I said. So, yeah, they are, fun characters, certainly on screen. Also, the story, at least, the main story, is interesting. And I kind of liked how they get into it because this main character, he like moved to France when he was 4, so he doesn't really have a connection with his, heritage. And I think his grandmother, the person who took care of him, converted to Catholicism and, changed their name to be more French and all of this type of stuff to fit in better. So he kind of lost that connection with his ethnicity. And so him getting it back through this gang and how they treat kind of his French aspects to him, like he loves eating with a fork, but apparently in Tamil culture, you eat with your hands, everything's with your hands. And so he kind of has to, work through that and get the skills to eat with his hands and kind of ultimately, I think, reconnects with his heritage. And then, has to kind of go back to how French he is as well. So it is a really interesting kind of personal struggle that the guy goes through, and certainly one that you kind of get attached to. And I think that brings me to what doesn't work with this movie. Well, unfortunately, it does kind of lose its steam after a while. It gets bogged down in this like secondary storyline where the gang leader wants to marry this woman, but she's the brother of someone from the other gang. And really, it's the father who's creating this conflict because the father is saying that she's not allowed to marry him, specifically because the gang leader is an orphan. Like, he's a war orphan, right? He's escaped the Civil War to go to France as, you know, a child or whatever. So the fact that he is an orphan is the main reason that he's not allowed to marry her. And the father, and also like, never has any lines, I think, in the whole story. So you never actually hear him say, you know, anything about it. You do see him like arguing in the background or something, but you never actually get to hear what he has to say. And so it just gets kind of lost in this story that's really not needed. And then, you know, I guess it builds kind of, you know, character development and you get to like these people. But then it does kind of just slow down everything. It's not as fun and a lot more like kind of grays and just, you know, pavement colors in these scenes. And so it's not parties or fights or anything like that by the end. So it does certainly, I would say, lose momentum and steam as it goes along, kind of gets lost in this secondary plot. So yeah, that can be an issue. Also, I did enjoy the music for the most part. It was either like I like the French songs or I kind of like the Bollywood adjacent songs. But then they have these songs that are in English, like it's a English rap song or English rock rap song, and it just comes in and you're just like, what? Like, why is this all of a sudden now speaking English? It really just has an awkwardness to it. Like, I'm there, I'm reading the subtitles, listening to, you know, a different language, and all of a sudden just, you know, this English rap rock song goes, and it's just out of place. It's really just out of place. So they have these out of place elements, these awkward elements, and certainly it goes into it to make for, you know, a less than perfect film. So would I recommend this movie? Well, if you want to see a different side of Paris, I think it's a good, fun way to watch this one. If you kind of are looking for cultural elements, like they do, you know, send money to the Tamil Tigers and stuff like that. Yeah, it's fun as well. You get to learn a little bit about, you know, different places and different people. So, you know, it's a fine movie to press play on. As for rating, well, I thought it was better than average, but not above average, if that makes sense. So I'm going to give it the 5.6. And with that being said, I think that's all I wanted to say. So like, subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Peace out.